Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Public Square with Mmusi Maimane. These are conversations that shape our future. This is not just any other podcast. This is about us having conversations simply beyond the popcorn type conversations. This is about us really digging deep into subject matters. We're going to have a lineup of guests that come from different parts of the world, different parts of the continent, and certainly subject matter experts here in South Africa. It's a conversation that helps us really grapple with some of the policy decisions that we need to make, but some of the conversations that we as a nation maybe are too scared to have. I look forward to you engaging on these conversations. You can certainly send me your questions. You can interact with us, and we'll make sure that we are able to delve into more of these topics. In this effect, I also want to thank Mobilen for being able to help us put this together. This is an opportunity for all of us to learn, to be educated, but also to have conversations that shape our future.
Yeah, we were a family. Believe me, if you got kicked, I felt the pain. We get fed with the European leagues, and we strongly believe that the European game is way superior to ours. Yes, there are superior teams there, but there's a lot of teams that wouldn't beat our teams.
Sure.
I can guarantee you that. You meet so many characters and so many good people.
Yeah.
Of course, if I had to say some of the bigger names, Mo Salah is a phenomenal guy.
Sure.
He's just, I always say this, I say that as good as he is as a player, I think he's a better human.
I have an incredible guest, one of my favorite South Africans, a person who, as you get to know their story, you'll appreciate just the wealth of wisdom. A South African who's played for Bafana, who's coached Egypt, coached Orlando Pirates. If there's anyone who can talk about football, I think Roger decides that person. Roger, thank you so much for coming through, and it's good to see you.
With pleasure, and usually we meet over lunch or coffee, but yeah,
or at gym,
absolutely,
at gym. Although I still need to do a session with you and see what I'm doing technically wrong, because you're looking great and I'm still struggling.
Nah, that's just on the outside.
Roger, AFCON happens. You and I watched the game, and firstly, should Senegal have walked off? I find that whole vibe, here's a strange penalty. And there's a build-up for me. So one, I thought when Bafana got a penalty disallowed, and then another one, I thought this tournament is amazing, but the refereeing is shocking. So I think there has been a build-up, and then Senegal walks off. There's been stories about towels being expropriated without compensation. You've done 3 AFCONs. Should Senegal have walked?
Yeah, I think, it looked bad. I think the competition was pretty good. I thought it was some great football matches that were played, no doubt about it. We saw some smaller countries compete pretty well against the so-called bigger countries, so that was good. A lot of good footballers that play out there. A lot of guys play in the top leagues in Europe that we all aspire to play in, and we watch every week, and Champions League and so on. But the final itself, I think it did leave a bit of a sour taste in a lot of people's minds. And, the fact that they threatened to walk off, and they did, and then they came back on, and the towel episode, the penalties and so on. If I really look at that particular game, I personally didn't think the referee was that bad. If I look at the decisions he made that looked controversial, I thought he had good reason to disallow the first goal with a push.
Well, I didn't. I still think Senegal scored. But
yeah, he did put his hand out there. He did push. All right. And then the penalty he did grab the guy with his hand around the neck, and he did pull him down. You can see it on far. But the problem that we have is, even as coaches and players, is the consistency of those calls. They're not always given. When do they consult the VAR? So in other words, for the first penalty, he gave the penalty, he disallowed the goal, but he could have gone to VAR to make sure that he did disallow it, and he chose not to use VAR.
Sure.
So those always leave us doubts and questions in our head, because we start thinking about, Morocco hosting, they've already declined a good training ground to Senegal. They are messing them around. Senegal's never played in that stadium. They only played the final there, where Morocco played every single match of the competition at that stadium.
Stayed at the same hotel.
So these factors start to play a part. Now, we don't see that from the outside. We're watching just game by game.
Yeah.
And we just see a stadium, we see 2 teams competing. But what you don't see is what goes on between the matches, the hotels, the training facilities,
Sure.
what's the treatment like? And I think that was more the frustration of Senegal. I think it came from things that we don't see.
Yeah.
Treatment of the team, the training ground is very far from the hotel. For example, so you got to spend an hour in the traffic and coming back. And sometimes there's heavy traffic. They block roads. There's a lot of things, a lot of gamesmanship that goes on that we're not aware of.
Sure.
So, I mean, the towel scenario, I mean, that was disgusting.
It was.
That was appalling. And then comes the walking off, which is not great in any circumstances. Many times I felt like walking off, to be honest with you, and we can't. 4 years ago, I played in a final in Cameroon against Senegal.
Yeah.
And we lost it on penalties. And 3 months later, we played Senegal for a World Cup qualifier with Egypt. We played in Cairo first. We won 1-0. We then had to go to Dakar to play.
And by we, you are coaching Egypt now. So I think that's
we go to Senegal and we lose 1-0. So we have to go to penalties.
Yeah.
65,000 people, capacity stadium, full house. And we get hit with lasers in our eyes. We couldn't take penalties. The lasers were, Salah hit his penalty. I think the ball hasn't landed yet.
Yeah.
And, we turned to CAF and said, guys, the lasers. And they went, well, what can we do? And the argument the guy from CAF said to me was, the laser's got to be permanently on your eye for longer than 5 seconds to damage your eye. And we said, well, I'm not a doctor. I know nothing about that. But, when you got 500 lasers having a go at you, you're not going to see. And these were placed behind the goals that we were taking penalties to. And then the lasers will go off when they came in to take the penalties. But you explain that to CAF and that just gets swept under the carpet. They move on. Senegal went through to the World Cup. We didn't. Of course, Egypt was upset, but a lot of Africa was happy. So it kind of just moves on. And that is sad because the walking off, for example, if you look at the rules of the game, if any player walks off the field and he walks back on without the permission of the referee, it's an automatic yellow card.
Yeah.
It's in the rules. Now you have 10 or not, only Maimane stayed on the field. So 10 players left. There were at least 4 guys on yellow cards.
So you mean actually Senegal should have played the final?
Correct. If you really follow the rules.
Applies a full.
Yes,
That's sure.
Those guys come back on the field. They should all get a yellow card for leaving the field without authority from the referee. And I mean, so that, and I'm glad the referee didn't take that action. I'm glad the referee allowed the game to go on. And then, of course, comes the penalty miss and the game just changed, And I'll be honest with you, I was watching the game and I thought, I'll watch the 90. I won't watch the extra time. I'm just going to go to bed now. And as these incidents were happening,
you couldn't
not leave the house.
You had to stay through it. I must concede, though, I was in Morocco the week before the tournament. And this was part of the discussion about, because there's often this dilemma that North Africa doesn't form part of Africa when it suits it. In other words, sometimes I get this thinking that, Moroccans, I even asked Moroccans, I said, why is it that you'll go play the Arab Cup and then play the AFCON? And then sometimes when people are like, but Moroccans are Africans, you're like, no, we're Arab, and all of that sort of debate. Sometimes it creates this continental tension that then eventually says, but so it introduces the idea that actually we think I was on Senegal's camp as a result of that. So I was quite like, Senegal needs to win. You've coached in that context. How is the thinking in amongst those countries, Egypt, all of that, about integration into the continent?
Yeah, I think you're very right. If you look back at the history I've worked in Egypt, for example, and if you look at the history of Egypt, which is phenomenal, the history of Egypt, many, many years ago, they wanted to be part of Europe.
Sure.
And they tried to be a part of Europe. I'm not an historian and I don't know the exact dates and so on, but there is that they wanted to be a part of Europe and they tried, and obviously they couldn't, and they stayed in Africa. You do get that sense that sort of northern belt, because I think their proximity to Europe, they have a lot more ties into Europe than the rest of Africa. it's natural. They just go across the sea and I get a lot of tourism. So a lot of interaction between those countries. If you guys, even if you go to Portugal, you see the south side of Portugal, where my families come from, which is the dark skin.
Sure.
And for sure, we've got Moroccan in our system.
Yeah.
Because it's so close.
Sure.
So there's definitely historically.
So are you supporting Morocco at the time?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was actually supporting the southern side as much as I could. Even when Mozambique was the last team in it, I was, hoping that Mozambique could do something.
I'd love to talk to you about Bafana in a moment, but let's start maybe about your football, because you are pre-1994, you're a white South African, you show up, now you're playing for a team, and I want to talk about that experience. Your first contract playing for clubs like Moroka Swallows. Here you are. I grew up in Dobsonville.
Okay, me too.
Yeah, you too. In that sense that here you arrive in Dobsonville, in our community. Now we've got Mlungu playing, but you are there in the Moroka Swallows. This is one of the big teams from Soweto. How did you find that experience? Tell me, I remember we were talking at lunch about your first experience, about even players putting things on your jersey that were supposed to be Muti, but you were like, what's this? So maybe I want to understand it, because it's important for how we view football.
Yeah, look, I think I was one of the fortunate ones, because I came from Mozambique originally. So when I came to South Africa as a 10-year-old, I didn't know what color was. Sure. Because I grew up in Mozambique, on the outskirts of those days, Lorenzo Marques, now Maputo, where my school was probably predominantly 80% black, and 20% white. So the school I went to, it was totally, multiracial, if you want to call it that. It was a normal school. And the funny thing is, there was no age restrictions. So I was 5, 6 years old and I had like a 10-year-old sitting next to me who started school.
Yeah.
So the ages were crazy in the classroom. But it was great. That's all I knew. And coming to South Africa, I remember coming to South Africa in 74, and we were refugees. We lived out of my dad's car for a couple of weeks until he got a job, and we moved on and fantastically accepted by the country, which was, for us, was great. And, I integrated straight away into a South African system, which was now a apartheid system. Sure. I didn't know anything about. But I remember coming home from school and asking my dad, the school's very funny. There's only white kids. And I was very unfortunate. My first school was a bilingual school, Afrikaans and English. So you can imagine I was thrown into that system.
Correct.
And I was like, wow, the language.
That is its own.
Yeah. The languages were crazy. There was English, there was Afrikaans, and I couldn't pick up either. Luckily, I started mixing with some kids who played football, and they noticed I could play.
Sure.
So they knocked on my door. And every afternoon they would knock on my door, come play. And of course I started playing. And within weeks, I started picking up the language, and it was easy for me.
Yeah.
But it was like sort of an eye-opener for me. Look at the changes now, all of a sudden. So my dad was very careful explaining to me the situation in the country, and he kept it he tried to keep it hush from me in the beginning, but as I started growing up and I started seeing it for myself, it was quite interesting, that why, what's going on. I wouldn't say I was never an activist or whatever.
Sure.
I was actually probably on the other side. I probably took the rewards of most white kids, with their hands out, and then took it all in.
Yeah.
I went to a nice school. I started living in a nice suburb, and I just got on with my life. It was just weird that later on I'm going to high school and starting to play football, and I started to play it more seriously as time went on. The only way I could sort of become a footballer was now to play what was known as a black sport. It was soccer.
Yeah.
Okay. But I took to that straight away. I knew that the best players were there, and that's where I had to be.
Sure.
And I was very fortunate that at a very young age, at 17 or 18, I got called and They offered me a contract, and I went to Quickot Benoni United with Jingles Pereira as the coach.
Wow.
And I played with some great players, and Mr. Executive, which your father will know better than you, of course. Sister Monica and many other guys that sketched Makonza.
Yes.
These were senior players playing with me, and I was a schoolboy. I used to arrive in my school uniform and play for them.
Yeah.
In Davidton, Sinawa Stadium.
Wow.
That was my first experience. And obviously I played my matric year at school. Of course, I was Jack the lad at school because I was earning a salary. I could have a car now. And I used to appear now and then on television.
Sure.
And it was quite weird that, the black staff at the school all knew me so well because they knew.
Of course, you are like...
The teachers didn't even know I was playing football.
Sure.
Of course, I played rugby at school as well. I played basketball. I played all the other sports. But that was quite an interesting period. And then I went to the army.
Yeah.
I went to the army for 2 years. I did national service. And I was doing patrols at Davidton in Benoni.
Sure.
And I knew the place so well. I knew it better than
the guys you knew.
And the clever guys.
Which to go.
Yeah. I knew the place better than the so-called clever guys that were in the SADF at the time. And I knew the roads better. I should say, no, turn right here, turn left here. I know these streets,
Sure.
It was quite an interesting time to see that. And then straight out the army, I played for a year in the Transvaal Football League. And then, of course, Marcus Wallace came knocking straight away. David Chabeli with the late Screamer Shabalala.
Yeah.
And they got me to go and join Swallows. And it was still out at George Goch Stadium, funny enough.
I remember that stadium.
I
George Goch, yeah.
I started at George Goch Stadium, and then Ellis Park got involved. Louis Late got involved in buying some shares at the club because he wanted soccer to go to Ellis Park.
Okay.
And we started moving across to Ellis Park. We played some games until we then moved directly to Dobsonville a couple of years later. And that's really where I kind of, I would say that when my football really got serious. It was a Dobsonville period.
And integrating into that dressing room, you are coming in, you've had this experience, you're now working in. Talk to me, because a lot of people think that whilst I think rugby today is celebrated with Siya Kolisi, with so many as the sport that was integrated, I think football had been doing this way before. It was doing it pre-94, it was doing it post-94. I remember players like Shane McGregor, Noel Cousins, Noel Cousins, so many others, Zayn Musa, so many players we were, as children, we could be able to watch this thing. What did that mean for you from a race relations point of view? Now you've had three sides of the argument. You've played before 94, you've now been in the army during that time, and now post-94, and then Bafana. Now suddenly sanctions are lifted and Bafana can play everywhere. What did you find that made it easy to integrate or less integrate? Because I think soccer has done a great deal that is untold than should be told.
I think, first of all, Mmusi, the most important thing is the way you're received. The way you are received is key.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, from day one, I always felt that the players, were good to me. I don't think they put any special treatment out to me, but the acceptance from their side was fantastic. I was just one of them straight away.
Yeah.
And that was good. I think I'd like to think sometimes if it was the other way, in other words, a black guy arriving in a white rugby team.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that he got the same treatment that I got.
Sure, but
because I got fantastic treatment. From day one. Was respect, and I don't think not just as a player, but I think as a human being, the respect was always top notch. I never felt once that they were out to get me or they spoke their language that I didn't understand.
Sure.
Not at all. And that was for me, that was key. And I must tell you, I made some unbelievable friendships.
Yeah.
During that period. And we still are friends. A lot of the guys that we are we know that we're tight.
Yeah.
We've all gone in our different directions and so on. But, you can feel it when you see each other. It's something that never leaves you. But the Muti thing was interesting, coming into Morocco Swallows.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, I remember one of my first games was that funny stadium with the stands all over the place out in one of the homelands.
In Mabatu.
That's
Yes,
it.
I remember that stadium.
And we played Mobatu Kicks in a friendly game.
Yes.
And
Which I think, if I'm not mistaken, produced people like Lucas Khatebe.
correct. I think Lucas played that day.
Yeah.
And we played against them. And to my surprise, this was my first game. And I walked in the change room and Screamer said, "Roger, you're the captain." And I went, "Captain," but that just shows you the type of respect he had and what he expected from me straight away.
Sure.
And of course, I took it on, but they gave me a jersey. And if you remember, I used to wear a pale blue baby colored jersey. There was the goalkeeper's jersey.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the chest was this brown sort of stain in the middle of the jersey. And I was used to my mother washing my own bucket. Now I pick up this jersey and this big brown mark.
Yes.
And I said, "No, man, I can, they give me a jersey like this."
Yes.
And I looked in my bag. I had my own jersey. And I looked at the guy next to me, and it was Andre Simpondo.
Yes.
Chaka Mpon. And Andre was very broken English, very simple guy. And I said, and he went, "No, it's okay. It's okay. Just wear it. Just wear it." And I went, "No, I can't wear it. It's jersey. It's dirty." And he was like really trying to calm me down and say, "No, please just wear it. Just wear it."
Sure.
And I said, "Okay." And I put the jersey on, But it was interesting how he kind of softened the blow straight away. And he said, "Look,
This is for
wear
us.
it. Don't worry. Just wear it. It's better." And it went on, and so much so that I can tell you that, I was born a Christian and a Catholic by family. Not that I'm but sure. But
You're a footballer.
yeah, I'm a footballer. But, there were certain times that I went to the guy and I asked for the Muti. I said, "Hey, where's the Muti?" I started to, I see it more as a superstitious thing. And, but yeah, I started to go to him because they used to give me a little packet of something. And my duty was, get in the goal mouth, open the packet and sprinkle it on the goal mouth and then put it back in your sock. And that's it. I said, "Not a problem. I can do that. As long as I don't have to cut myself or whatever. No problem. That's that."
Did you concede goals on the day?
And I started having such a good run.
Then you start.
When the game started, I was like, hey. I did my stuff,
Right.
And the guy said, oh, yes, you give it to me. It becomes a superstition and you start to believe in those things.
Do you think, knowing what you know, I happen to believe that I think South Africans, we have issues of inequality. There's no denying about that. We've got problems of economic inclusion. We've got challenges around, and some of those things exacerbate race relations because often I like to say to people, when you do distribution of income, if you look at 5 quintiles, your lowest quintile, 73% of the people who are at the highest level of poverty happen to be Black. If you went to the top quintile, people who are earning over 100,000, 73% of those happen to be white. And so sometimes you can see distribution of income gets confusing, and I think can exacerbate some of the racial challenges that we have. But I happen to also believe that socially, citizens try their best to get along. They really do work hard. And you've been at the cauldron of it in football, in Bafana, in all of that. If someone was sitting here today and say, is there hope for an integrated South Africa? Having known what you know about football, and I'd love to hear your story about even the Rugby World Cup and you being the distributor of knowledge about the scores. What do you think we get right, and what do you think?
Let me tell you what I think we got right. And even from a personal experience, when I was roped into a so-called black team, it was Morocco Swallows. I would like to believe that I wasn't put into that team because I was a white guy. That would destroy me. If you said to me, you had to be in the team because it's a quoted thing, I'd rather not be there. I'd rather go play tennis as a single sport or golf, and that's it. Because nobody wants to be
Certainly not sports, I think, in that instance.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody likes it. I think anybody who carries that token is uncomfortable.
Sure.
And no one can deny that. I'm sure of it. We want to get there on merit. And I believe that I got in on merit.
Sure.
And so did many other guys after me, Shane McGregor and Al Cousins. I can name so many that came.
Of course.
Mark Fish and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Neil Tovey. And I mean, there's so many that came through. And I really believe that we were there because we were really good. I do believe in the other sports, not so much cricket, because I think cricket had talent all around.
Sure.
But I think in rugby, for example, I think some players were pushed initially to get in, to make the photograph look good. Now we don't need that.
Sure.
Now rugby has gone complete turnaround.
Yeah.
Now we're producing black, brown, red.
Sure.
We're just producing rugby players, which is where we really want to be.
Sure.
And I think with the football as well. I mean, a lot of people, I heard some remarks saying, there wasn't one white guy in the Bafana team. The reality is there's not one white guy who deserves to be in the Bafana team. And I'm a football guy.
Yeah.
So if there was one, I would say he deserves to be in. Just like I would say any black guy or anybody else that deserves to be in the team.
Sure.
But right now, I would say the Bafana team was chosen pretty well. And I think that they've got the best 25 players that are available.
Yeah.
So what if there isn't a white kid in the team? It just happens. It's one of those, it's like cattle farming. You get good crops, bad crops. It changes,
Sure.
But the rugby is just phenomenal right now. And if you talk about integration, I've been there. And we've been through highs and lows with the teams, traveling through Africa, you name it. And I tell you what, we were tight. We were a family. Believe me, if you got kicked, I felt the pain.
Sure.
There was no color issue.
Sure.
We were there just to fight for the jersey and the flag. So I think where I come from, I never saw color as a problem. I always felt that we were there. We got picked because of who we were and the way we played. It's almost like kids in a schoolyard. If you go to a school, I always say this, that if you go to a school and you want to know the best 11 footballers to play in the football team, don't go and ask the geography teacher who now coaches the team. Don't go and ask the principal who's now been in charge of the football team. Call the kids together and tell them, you guys pick the best 11. Believe me, they will pick the best 11.
And they'll know.
And they'll know who the best 11 are.
Sure.
And they don't give a damn what car your dad drives, or what color of your skin, or if your school fees are paid or not paid, or if your marks are high or low. They're going to pick the best 11.
This is the thing about sport. And I think as a South African, I happen to think as a nation, we have a lot in this space to be proud of. I really do believe that. I really do believe equally so. One of the things that is going to be important going forward is that in the same way, one of my frustrations is that during the 2010 World Cup, I would arrive at a stadium and I must say for many white South Africans, they would, if the English team walked onto the field, they'd be able to go, that's so-and-so, he plays for Leicester, he plays for Liverpool, he plays for Man United, he plays for whatever. And when the Bafana team walked on, they couldn't necessarily go, that's a Chiefs player, that's a Pirates player, that's a Sundowns player, or that's a whatever. And those were the good old days of Kaiser Chiefs, I must concede. So I would hope that we could reintegrate that sort of national pride, that sort of, and you've had opportunities to coach here. You coached Orlando Pirates. How was that? I mean, you coaching, this is one of the oldest clubs in the country. This is Orlando Pirates. This is not any other team. It's my father's a Buccaneer, and I want to play you a message before we finish today from him. He was so grateful for the message you sent him because he's such a big admirer of yours. But here you are, you're coaching one of Soweto's great prides. How was that for? And it's not just an experience question, but I think it speaks to the fact that if we're able to pick players on merit, particularly in sport, are we then able to also get through where we strip away the labels that say this is a black sport, this is a white sport. I wanna see a day where black, white, Indian, colored South Africans could be Pirates fans, and then we could hate each other. Or when I say hate on each other, on the basis of the fact that I could say you support Pirates, I support Chiefs. In the same way as you could say you support Man United, you support Liverpool. But it's not a question of it's a black sport, it's a white sport, but it's more a question of just what football rivalry should be.
Look, Mmusi, I grew up as a white South African, and obviously my social circles, a lot of them were white. You know, I won't deny that. Of course, always at the football.
Sure.
You know, so you could say maybe I was jumping from one side to the other side, you know, on both areas, as you know, my job and then my socializing with family and friends.
Correct.
But I used to get told many times, you know, I'll be at a dinner party and a distant cousin would be sitting there and he would say something like, "Oh, are you still playing with the black guys?" You know?
Yeah.
And I think some of them I should have taken a little bit more action maybe.
Yeah.
But those remarks were very often, you know, and I learned to get a thick skin quickly. And I went, yeah, I'm making a living out of it. And you want to see my house? You want to see my car that's paid for? And, you know, I was very proud that I was earning an honest living out of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, you kind of often got those remarks. But believe you me, I know that he went to his colleagues and told them that I was his cousin.
Yes.
I'm 100% sure of that. But that's just maybe a generation that came out of that apartheid era with the new government. And it's a generation that unfortunately we have had to experience. I've had to experience. And I'm hoping that my son, and that I've really experienced that. My kids didn't see color. I mean, I remember asking my son, and I'll be honest, I'll tell you an honest truth story. He said to me that his friend is coming over to play tomorrow after school. We must bring him up. So we said, okay. Have you asked his mom? Yes, his mom, this and that. Now we're trying to find out who's his friend.
Yes.
Okay. And he couldn't give us the name because he called him some nickname that we had no idea. Eventually I asked him, but, you know, is his mom like a white lady or a black lady? And I shouldn't have asked that question.
Yeah.
But innocently, I made that question. And my son looked at me and he said, no, she's a mom. She carries a handbag. and that was nice to see that, you know, on the one side of me, he left me totally confused. I still didn't know who he was talking about. But on the other side, I was very happy to experience this. Well, he doesn't get it, which is great. So in those little moments we go, there's hope. There's a lot of hope for us because we're going to get it right. And I think we do get it right in many, many ways. When you talk about the clubs and we're going to get the population going, you know, do we support Pirates or do we support Chiefs? I think we often think of the white population with the rugby atmosphere. But don't forget that the rugby atmosphere, we support a city or a province.
Yeah.
You know, so the Durban guys support the Sharks.
And
the Cape Town guys support the Stormers or Western Province.
The Lions.
You support the Lions from Johannesburg, right?
Yeah.
In football, it's not like that.
Sure.
You know, our teams are nomads. A lot of them, your club plays 5 games in Polokwane, 5 in Durban, and 10
and we're a national brand. Yeah.
Okay. Is that your argument? Okay.
Yeah, that is my argument.
But there's no sort of like belonging as such. You know, where if you look at the rest of the world, if you come from that city or from that suburb, you attach yourself to that club like we have. I mean, I've been in Cape Town, 13 years. I'm a Stormers fan.
Okay.
You know, I've become a Stormers guy. I watch the games. Yeah, I know, but I enjoy it. But, you know, I enjoy going to support the Stormers. I support my Cape Town when I see them playing in this T20. You know, it's the Cape Town team.
Yeah.
In football, it's not exactly like that yet. You know, the teams are coming from all over the place. They get sold, they get moved.
And players move.
So it's very difficult to get attached to a club. when you say, yeah, the South Africans we're not supporting the local brand, I disagree. Because the majority of the population supports.
Sure.
Are you worried about what's the white population, 8% or whatever it is? Are you worried about that percentage?
That's a fair point.
Are you really worried about that they're going to make or break the football industry?
No, I just think for that population, I want them to be a part of the whole. Because in the same way as you're watching many Black South Africans adopt rugby and begin to be passionate about it, it's become an enriching experience. We must be able to celebrate Ronwen Williams in the same way as we're able to celebrate Sia Kolisi, in the same way as we're able to celebrate Themba Bavuma, because these are South Africans that we all share passion and are invested in them winning. So maybe it's less about whether it's just that I always think that when you are in a space that's diverse, you are richer for it. And I think when you don't experience spaces like that, you're robbing yourself.
I hear you. And I fully understand that. And I'm always the one that love to see white faces at the stadium. And I respect people who go out there and watch these games. And I wish more would come. I really do. I'm one that says, watch a PSL game live. You'll be pleasantly surprised how good it is.
Of course.
We get fed with the European leagues. And we strongly believe that the European game is way superior to ours. Yes, there are superior teams there. But there's a lot of teams that wouldn't beat our teams.
Sure.
I can guarantee you that. I've been one of the fortunate guys that have traveled the world to watch players all over Europe and so on. And when I coached Iran and Egypt, I had to go and watch different players playing all over Europe for not so strong teams. And believe you me, I watched some games that I sat there and was a headache to watch 90 minutes of football.
Sure.
So we believe, for example, we watch Arsenal against Chelsea on television, and everybody's stuck
to mediocre
television. And it's okay. So you're a Liverpool man. Okay. So it's Liverpool versus Man United. And we sit on the television, we watch it, and we really enjoy it. Remember, the camera work is fantastic. The commentary is fantastic. Everything they do, the graphics, whatever, is world class.
Yeah.
All right. Those players have been promoted crazy. All right. And you watch that. Fine. You watch it on television. Believe you me, if you watch it live, you will not have the same feeling for the game itself. Yes, the atmosphere is good, that they're singing, they chant all game, blah, blah, blah. They will never walk alone. That's anything they can do, but they do that. But you go watch, for example, Fulham against Brighton.
Sure.
It's not. I'd rather go watch Chiefs Pirates.
Look,
and I'm telling you this as a football person. I'm not promoting South African football.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in football, you're better off watching Sundowns against Chiefs or Pirates or Cape Town City or whatever than watch those games. Because some of those games, you can actually park outside and you can see the game because the ball just travels up in the sky and they're just playing.
Sure.
And so it's not always what we think. We often believe that.
I think there's a psychological programming that tells us that if it's European, it must be good. If it's African, it must be not so great. And I think some of that socialization, historically, I think anyways, is part of what we need to inbuild confidence in ourselves that says, actually, I am a proud African. I love this continent. I love what we do. Being that does not make me anti. So I'm not saying I am proudly African, therefore anti something. I am proudly African, and it can exist in this cause. I'm agnostic about the Chinese league. I'm sure they've got teams there. I'm agnostic about Japan or whatever the case might be. So I just do think that there's something that is beautiful about this continent. And I happen to think the future is really African. That's my belief. I think when I was watching the AFCON and I reflected back on the European League, without the African players, let me not talk about the European League pejoratively, talk about the English League. You think about strikers.
It was
and where they come from. It was deeply affected because all of those players are not there.
Correct.
Now, we can speak all day about football. You're a leader, you're a coach. You've coached Mo Salah, you've coached many other players who's been your favorite? Who's when you think about your job,
Yeah.
which players have you worked with that you thought to yourself, man, this guy was phenomenal as a human being? I won't ask you who was the worst, but
Look, this journey that I've been on, honestly speaking, it's all about the friendships.
Okay.
And the characters you meet along the way. It's not so much the destination; it's more about the company that you had with you. So going through all these tournaments and playing in these, their massive stadiums and so on, you meet so many characters and so many good people.
Yeah.
Of course, if I had to say some of the bigger names, I mean, Mo Salah is a phenomenal guy.
Sure.
He's just, I always say this, I say that as good as he is as a player, I think he's a better human.
Sure.
And I think,
it warms my heart as a Liverpool supporter.
But yeah, genuinely, that's what he is. He's really a good guy. I know he had this rant on television a couple of weeks ago. For me, it was very uncharacteristic coming from him, but I also understand where he comes from and why. We have been talking, on WhatsApp and so on, but not like him at all. But a phenomenal guy, and there's so many others. I mean, the Iranian team that I coached, also at the World Cup, the goalkeeper, when we met him, he was washing cars.
Really?
Yeah. And he came over, we invited him, we took him to a club.
I guess it helped, make great saves. You can move movements. My favorite.
Mr. Miyagi scenario. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm winning.
So, unbelievable. I mean, the guy he got into a team straight away. He made his way up. Within 6 months, he was in the national team.
Sure.
And he was, if you look at the Guinness Book of Records, he's got the longest throw as a goalkeeper.
Really?
In a World Cup game.
See, car washing business is helpful.
And a phenomenal guy as well. Out of nowhere, washing cars for $10, $20, whatever it was. All of a sudden, within a couple of years, just playing in the World Cup. And there's so many stories like that I could tell you.
Yeah.
Of people that made a difference. And of course, there's many that also made a difference to me as well because of their character and the way they carry themselves and how they behave. So there's so many guys that I could tell you that, I don't know, Safiso Mieni is a kid that he arrived, knocked on the window of my car with a plastic bag in his hand. And he said, Coach, I want to train.
Sure.
And I looked at him, I thought, man. And I don't know why. I went, okay. I said, go to the kit man, tell him to give you kit. And of course, the kit man came running out. Jack said, Coach, this guy wants kit. I said, give him kit. I want him to train.
Sure.
And he trained. And every tinker ran up to me during the training session. That kid that you brought down is unbelievable. And I said, what kid? I couldn't even remember.
Yeah.
And he said, come have a look. And I went to look at him training on what exercise he was doing. And I was like, okay, he must come back tomorrow. And the next day he came to my office, we signed a contract.
Wow.
And the kid just, I watched him grow up,
you've coached people like Ronaldo and so on.
Oh, no, Ronaldo, yeah. Cristiano. And there's been Taremi, the great striker from Iran. But also we've played against you've come up against a lot of top players, especially coaching in the World Cup, you come across big players. And they're not just big, they also big physically, I was telling you.
Sure.
But I always say the World Cup is very, very special because there's no bad players at the World Cup. The weakest countries have got their best players. So there's only good footballers.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see that. When you take on the field, there's no weaknesses. Everyone's top notch.
You've written a book, A Man of Action.
A long time ago.
I look forward to reading it. But as in my scanning through it, you speak about your encounters sharing a room with Steve Kompela. How was that? And then I want to know one last question, which was the World Cup rugby final. The coach refuses for you to train, to watch the game, train during that time. How was your experience at that time? Because this is a national thing.
Yeah, look, one of my first things was getting called up for the national team for Bafana Bafana in those early years. Yeah, and when we were so called the 4x4s because we got beaten
every week. I remember that.
Fantastic learning curve for us.
Yeah.
But I remember arriving in the first camp and my roommate was Steve Compella.
Yeah.
And I was actually in the room already when he walked in.
Sure.
And I could see on his face, like, why
He'd drawn the
probably went,
straw.
how's my luck? I think everybody, they give me this white car.
Yeah.
And it was so amazing that we just hit it off. You know, from that moment onwards, it was like, you know, I was in a place called Helderfontein Hotel in near Four Ways in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And he walked in and I said, Steve, you want that bed or this bed? And he went, I'll take this one. Okay, cool. And that's how it started.
Sure.
And we're still friends today. We still phone each other and we rag each other off every day. But that friendship just sort of grew.
I mean, you told me once that day the Rugby World Cup was kicking off.
Yes. Yeah, I'll tell you that story. So I joined Sundowns, and Sundowns bought me from Swallows, and it was the beginning. I think it was the Rugby 1995 World Cup.
Yeah.
And we had a coach called Clemens Westerhoff from Holland who knew nothing about rugby. You know,
Sure.
He had coached Nigeria in the World Cup. He was very successful.
I remember him.
And we were training, and it happened to be the opening game of the World Cup rugby in Cape Town.
Yeah.
South Africa versus Australia. And of course, the whole hype of our first big event into the new government, really.
Yeah.
It was our first massive world event. You know, it was the World Cup rugby. And of course, there was a bit of a vibe, you know, amongst the players and so on, even though nobody spoke about it.
Sure.
But me and my big mouth, I went straight to the coach and I said, Coach, tomorrow we're training, you know, at this time. Can you not move the training an hour back or an hour forward? He said, why? So I said, so we can watch the rugby match. You know, it's important for us. It's a live game. We can see the rugby match. And he went, rugby, it's not a sport. Blah, 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 blah. No way. And he just blocked us off. That was it. We went to train the next day. And when the training ended, of course, we got into the changing. We were at a shower and I had my back turned to the players. And I managed to take my cell phone out of the bag and I saw my old Ericsson with an aerial like this. And I had 10 messages and I told my friends, please text me the scores as it goes. You know, I need to know. Okay. And I grabbed my phone and I saw the result that we were leading 9-6 or something like that. I said, okay, we 9-6 up at half time. I'm standing to be corrected. I can't remember exactly. Okay, but at least we're winning. Okay. I put the phone down and I carried on drying myself. And I noticed that there was a hush, it was quiet in the change room because usually everyone's talking.
Yeah.
And I turned around and me as the white kid, you can imagine there's 25 black guys standing in front of me like,
what's going on? With towels only.
With towels only.
Yeah.
And I turned around and I said like, what? And I'll never forget, it was actually Sizwe Mutaungi. He said to me, he said, what's happening? What's the score? What's the score? And I said, we're 9-6 up. And there was this massive celebration.
Sure.
Yeah. And I had to explain to them, guys, 9-6 is not enough. It's only off
Not
time.
like football.
Yeah, 9-6 is not
nothing.
up, you know? But I had to explain the rules and so on. And then I spent the next couple of weeks while the World Cup was being played and we were in hotels, camping for games and so on. And the guys would, 20 guys in my room because they wanted to know the rules and what happens now. Why is the ball going backwards and not forward? And, you know, I had to explain the rules as we went. Why is it a scrum? No scrum. What happens in a scrum? And so I didn't enjoy that World Cup at all because I spent time
being the VAR,
being everything. But, you know, and in that moment, I noticed that this is the country.
Sure.
And here we go. We're supporting rugby. You know, and you saw, I mean, you've seen the pictures, you've seen the movie and so on. I mean, it's fantastic.
I remember watching rugby as a kid and thinking to myself, sure, I couldn't figure out why US Van der Westhuizen was passing the ball backwards, but it felt important for a country. I want to close this conversation because I want to give a leadership moment. You've led not only as captain, as coach, but you also made some incredible leaders, notwithstanding Nelson Mandela. What would you say you, in observing Nelson Mandela's life, you would extract as a leader? And what would you give Football has changed. There's so much that goes on in football nowadays. The game has changed. Coaching, we've got a new generation of players. Some of them earn more than the coach. In fact, most of them earn more than the coaches. And they come in. I find leading organizations, that sense of entitlement. Generationally, I kind of come from a place where I'm like, what? You were lucky to have a job. What rights do you have? Whereas now I'm dealing in a universe where the younger generation of guys come into work and they know their rights. They know what they stand for. So all of them. So I want to hear from you as a coach, as a leader, and someone who says, look, I have met people like Nelson Mandela. Here's what I would think leadership. If I was thinking of coaching, if I was thinking about doing that, what would be your input today?
And I think, look, having met Nelson Mandela, and fortunately enough, numerous times, in different circumstances, if it was just a handshake before the game started, or introducing him to my players, or in a hotel, or dinners, organized dinners, and so on.
You were the Mandela magic people.
Yeah, I was part of that Mandela magic. When he came to the hotel, we wouldn't lose,
Yeah.
And of course, just like the Muti I had in my sock when I was at Swallows, we believe that Nelson Mandela, I don't know what schedule he had, but he had to be with us the day before the game. Otherwise, we weren't going to perform. But the one thing I learned from him, and I've learned from other leaders, that I think a lot from him is the humane side. I think the human side that he always portrayed, even though he was this figure that I felt he had an aura.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people that have met him have felt the same way. They always felt that there was something about him.
Sure.
People that have met the likes of Mother Teresa and whatever, they always get this feeling. And generally, I felt that. And I'm not a very, I don't believe in things like that, but I definitely felt there was something about him. But the nice thing that came through was always the human side of him. He was one of us. He was just like you and I. And he would admit mistakes and laugh at himself and joke about things. And he was human, totally human. And I think when you see that, you arrive and you're the leader, it's important that you're just like them.
Yeah.
You got to be human. I've always said that, I've played with a lot of players. I've coached a lot of players. I've played against a lot of players. I always say that colleagues is temporary, football colleagues, but friendships are for life.
Sure.
And that's my belief, even with players. I always tell a player that one day if he's, I like a guy like I mentioned, Sifiso Mieni, for example. I hope Sifiso Mieni, when he's walking with his son one day, he introduced me to his son as a friend of his.
Sure.
Not, this guy was my coach. A coach means nothing to me.
Yeah.
But if he says to his son, my boy, he's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
That is what I want to hear. And I think when you meet real leaders, you experience that. The fact that he remembers your name, and he remembers certain things that happened in the past.
Yeah.
Those facts are so important. And that's what he had. And I think when you can be that as a leader, you produce a lot better product. I know you come from a teaching background, if I'm not mistaken. I wouldn't say I was an average student. I was a below average student.
Great football.
Yeah. But my maths mark was in the 50s.
Sure.
But the following year, if I had a teacher that I could relate to, and the teacher could relate to me, and I liked her or him, and somehow we spoke a little bit about the football results, and my mark would go up to 60. But if I had a teacher that I couldn't relate to and I couldn't make eye contact with and I didn't trust or whatever, my mark would go down to 40. Not because they were bad teachers or good teachers.
Just they were human.
It was just the human side that you needed. So I believe that, be human, be kind, be honest.
Yeah.
And I think those are the qualities that make good leaders. Not just Erasmus and a nose up in the sky. And more important, I think it's important that you can, and you see a lot of top coaches and leaders are able to do that.
I must concede, and I'll wrap this up here, because the one thing I've always been appreciative of great leaders. And having met a number all over the world, I've met prime ministers, presidents, met all of that. The great ones are great human beings because the technical term of humanity is that we share common humanity. It's that Ubuntu. And I find great leaders are able to say, I share the common humanity, therefore your threats are my threats. And what we can exchange in the world is about that shared humanity. In fact, one of the things I genuinely believe about Africa is that the gift we'll give to the world is what Steve Biko said, which was a human face. And what we will give to the global platform in the context of AI, in the context of so many other things, is our humanity.
And we have loads of it.
And that's who we are.
Yeah.
So, Raj, thank you so much for coming through. You've given me time, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate your humanity. I appreciate who you are to South Africa, but who you are to the continent as a coach, but to the global ambassador world of just someone who, when I was thinking about how to talk about the identity of South Africans, because it's part of what we want to try and work through here, you've given me a sense of which I look at you and I think part of why I wanted to have you on is because I was talking about you with my wife, and I said to her, we talk about integration in different spaces, whether it's schools, whether it's communities, whether it's whatever. You've lived through it in so many different parts, internationally, learning different languages, cultures, all of that. But you've navigated it well and remained an incredible human being. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for sharing your time. And I look forward to reading your book.
Oof, okay.
But seriously, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was a really great conversation with Roger Desar. It wasn't just about football. It really was about life and about what it means to be a South African. I hope you really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope it's given you much to think about as far as tomorrow is concerned. I look forward to catching up with you again next week. Look forward to the next episode when we speak to another great South African.